Hope on the Hard Road podcast, where you and your family can find community, find encouragement, and find hope for the road ahead.
The thing the whole wide, wild world needs the most is you to be you. You to be you. And I hope that I find hope in that, and I hope the listeners find hope in that you don't have to strive to be somebody else, right? Like, it seems so cliche and simple, but we just live in this world where I just find myself doing that. I find my kids doing that. I find my friends doing that. Like, to just be somebody else is not going to serve a purpose in this world. We need you. That's what we need the most.
Hey guys, October is Down Syndrome Awareness Month. And on today's episode, we're super excited to welcome guest Heather Avis, New York Times bestselling author, podcaster, and the founder of The Lucky Few.
For over a decade, Heather has been shifting the narrative around Down syndrome, using storytelling, advocacy, and activism to build a world where everyone belongs. Through her work, she invites us to embrace our differences and shout the worth of every person.
So let's listen in. Well, Heather, for the very few that don't know you, would you like to share your story and what got you started?
I have written a few books. My first book is my whole story in a book form, so it's long, but I'll give you guys the most condensed version that I can get to. My husband and I have been married for 23 years and got married really young. I was 20, so you can do the math. I'm 43. And I knew I wanted to be a mom and have kids. And as we started down that path, found out that I was not going to be able to have children naturally. Went through like a few years of infertility. And then we set down towards the path of adoption. And on that path, tried to maintain some control still, in that we wanted a healthy infant. So we went with a private agency. And then in a passing conversation with our social worker, we learned that there were two babies placed in the agency who have Down syndrome. We had said no to that, so she wasn't offering them to us. It was like, this is what's happening right now at the agency. So it was like, things are really slow, like, hang in there. And as soon as I read that email, it really changed everything in me. I couldn't unknow it. I was frustrated at that. Like, I wish I could have just said, oh, that's nice, and then moved on, waiting for my healthy baby. I said something to my husband, and he's like, yeah, I think we should pray about it. I said, I don't think so. Like, you were supposed to say, no, that's not what we're going to do. And so we ended up like walking towards saying yes to this baby with Down syndrome. And by the time we had said, okay, we want to know more, we had found out then, she wasn't being placed. They had learned some things about her, and they're like, we're not placing her. I'm like, oh, okay, that was weird. And then 2 months later, we got a call and said, that baby we told you about, we're ready to look for a home for her. Are you interested still? And we were. And so we went and met with the agency in person and learned that not only did she have Down syndrome, but she had a congenital heart defect, and she had a thing called pulmonary hypertension that was primary, so not connected to her heart, but was a lung condition that likely would never be resolved, that would require oxygen and medication her whole life. And so now we're like, Down syndrome is a back burner issue. Like, what? Now we're looking at a medically fragile child and still not able to say no. Like, all these things on paper that's like, of course you say no to this. We couldn't. And so we took saying yes to her was more of not being able to say no. And that was like one foot in front of another towards her. Very much God, like, ushering us in his grace to being able to say yes to her. And I call her my scariest and best yes, because it was terrifying. Like, she came home, and the next day we had an appointment with her heart surgeon to schedule open heart surgery. And I'm like 26 years old, or maybe 27. I have to do the math there. And I'm a first-time mom, and she's on oxygen and medication and has Down syndrome. And so we brought her into our life, and very quickly felt that there had been this narrative and this story told about her to us, but that before we knew her, that was all really scary and negative. A story about disability, that is something to be avoided, that you should feel sorry for, that you should fix. And that I'm holding this baby, and I'm like, you're just a baby, and you're amazing. And I'm so lucky. And I felt overwhelmed those first few months, especially in everyday sense, of like, I can't believe I get to be her mom. I can't believe I almost missed this because of the narrative being told about her that wasn't based on reality. It was based on people's assumptions or ideas that were not like founded in experience or in relationship to a person with Down syndrome. And so I started using this phrase, the lucky few, and really connecting with other families in the Down syndrome community who felt that as well and had a story with a different story because they didn't adopt, but like a similarity in that there was this devastation and this sadness around a diagnosis. And then getting to what I call the other side of it of like, what in the world? Like I'm so lucky to have this kid. And so that experience was similar in the Down syndrome community. So that was happening. And then when we started our second adoption, I was like arms wide open. Like I tried to control getting a healthy infant and ended up with a child that had medical needs and a disability. I'm just open to whatever. So we went through the foster care system and said yes to most things. And then we got a call and we were going to say yes to any child that came to us. And the first call we got was for a little girl who was 5 months old, no disabilities, no health issues, like no drug exposure in utero, which when you adopt through the foster care system, one of the first things you hear is like your best case scenario is drug exposure in utero. Maybe they don't say that now. This is 14 years ago. So as we say yes to this little girl and she comes home, her name's Truly. And Truly, we were told was Mexican. And then we found out that she's half Black and half Guatemalan. And then when life was at its fullest with a 5-year-old with like a lot of needs with disabilities, Macy, our oldest, and a 3-year-old who just loved to push a boundary and was like bouncing off the walls with energy and ideas. We got a call about a mother who was pregnant and had an in utero diagnosis for Down syndrome and a congenital heart defect. And I thought, I don't think I can do one more thing. Like I'm going to break in half if someone puts something on my plate. And then 2 months later, we brought our son home. And he also has Down syndrome and at 4 months old had a open heart surgery. And that is how we are who we are. He's 11 now. And I think it's important to say too, for Macy, our oldest, at 3 years old, her pulmonary hypertension was totally resolved pretty miraculously. Her heart surgery went well and she's going to be 17 and she's totally healthy. No health issues at all. So here we are, our little family of 5. And that's the story.
Wow, that is an incredible story and certainly an incredible dynamic and a lot of different things.
A lot going
all
on.
at the same time. Tell us, like from the early years to maybe where you are now, how did you navigate that and become like the wholeness of the family that you are? From the early years of the diagnosis, obviously you adopted them, and then just making family work.
I mean, I'm curious your answer to this too. It's one of those things like, it's just all I know.
Yeah.
So that we're just going to do it. Right. Like I even feel like when Macy first came home and I'm a new parent, that I didn't know how to parent any other way. And so people would just be like amazed at having a baby who was on oxygen. And I'm like, yeah, but this is what we're doing. And if your kid needed it, you would do it. Like I could never do what you did. And it's like, no, you actually could. And you probably would if the experience or if the opportunity was what it needed to be. So I think like navigating the dynamic of the family, it just is our normal. Do you guys feel that with your family?
It sounds like you just jumped in with both feet and said, let's make this work. And, I guess part of the question would be like, how did you and your husband kind of form a team to, especially once you have a second and then a third child, to form a team and, maybe projecting that onto families that maybe are starting this journey?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I think the key word there is team.
Mhm.
And I have just the utmost respect for single moms or single parents, period. And single parents raising kids with disability, like mad respect, because my husband and I, from the very beginning, made the commitment to the same thing, right? Like we both stepped together towards adopting this baby with the understanding that we were both not going to be 50-50 parents. We were going to be 100-100. Like both of us are 100% in this. We're 100% in this parenting thing. And it wasn't just, I was a stay-at-home mom and he was working full-time, but even in that, he was the partner in making sure that we were raised, like meeting our child's needs. And that partnership and that teamwork, it has been such a gift. And the way that we made anything work, I think, is how I feel. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and you are so right. In those early years, there's a lot of transition that takes place. And you do hear that comment often about, I don't know how you do it, or you're so amazing and stuff. But I just love what your input was onto that, because a lot of our families hear that. And yeah, it's a journey, isn't it? We love on the Lucky Few podcast, which we'd love to have you share more about how you start often on that podcast with, let's shout some worth and shift some narratives. We just love that. What got you started on saying that? What's the story behind that statement?
Yeah, that goes pretty far back. The shifting narratives goes back to, I kind of alluded to this when I was sharing about our family, that there was this narrative about Macy and about adopting a child with Down syndrome. One that is actually why her parents didn't parent her, because they had a story and a narrative about what it meant to have her. And it's more complicated than that, but ultimately she didn't have Down syndrome. They would have parented her. But same with my son. If he didn't have Down syndrome, his birth mother would have parented him. And again, it's more complicated. There's dynamics and there's layers and there's other things happening in any adoption story. At the end of the day, I think, wait a second, there was this idea around what it meant to raise a child with Down syndrome that's breaking up families, and a narrative that almost kept us from saying yes to her. And at 17 years old, I look at her, I'm not exaggerating, every day for her entire life, I've looked at her and thought, I can't believe I get this. Like, I could have missed this. I could have missed you because of this false narrative. And then again, meeting other people in the Down syndrome space, meeting people with Down syndrome, learning like there's these studies that it's like 97 or something percent of people with Down syndrome are super happy with who they are. Yeah. And you're like, well, who's telling the story that you should be so devastated that you got a Down syndrome diagnosis? Now, is the unknown scary? Absolutely. Is like an expectation that's not met a hard thing to let go of? Is there like some grief there? Absolutely. But Down syndrome, I don't know. Like, where's that coming from? So that it really became this charge for me in my life to shift that narrative, to shift the narrative through being an example of and living an outwards life and a story that people can have access to, and then inviting other people to do the same. It's not easy. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. It's really, really hard. But also, hard doesn't necessarily bad. Hard's just hard.
Yes.
And so life is hard. Mm-hmm. And even stories like, well, they're going to live with you forever. It's like, well, so might your kid without a disability at 30 years old be living in your basement. Like, that's also true, right? Yeah, this might happen and it might not. But at the end of the day, we've got this beautiful human made in the image of God, of a good God, who it gets to exist in this world as they are. And so that's the narrative shift, right? Like, we've got to tell a bigger story within the Down syndrome community, especially so, because we're like, need to save lives. There's a statistic that more than 70% of women who get an in utero diagnosis terminate their pregnancy solely based on that diagnosis. They would have parented otherwise, right? So it's not even like necessarily pro-life, pro-choice. It's not an abortion thing, I don't think necessarily. It's more so viewing a certain kind of person as worthy of life.
Yes.
And so we've got to shift that narrative, because people with Down syndrome and disabled people are worthy of a life.
Mm-hmm.
Big, full, honoring life.
Yeah.
So that's the narrative shift. And then the shout their worth is really about people aren't really listening. And so we've got to shout it. We've got to say it loud and proud. And in any way and opportunity that there is to say, oh no, this person is worthy of all of it. Worthy of a space in your classroom, worthy of a space at the dance studio, worthy of being a member of their community, worthy of a family, right? Like, worthy of being a member of their church, worthy of all of it. Mm-hmm. But we got to say that big and loud, because the narrative is so counter to that.
It is hard. I mean, our organization is Hope on the Hard Road, recognizing that, but you don't get stuck there. You look for the perspective and the joy and how to pour out. And they offer so much on perspective of life. Like you said, 90-something% of them enjoy their life. Well, they ship that. They're authentic, they're genuine, and we definitely love to celebrate that. We would really love to know, you and your husband started a foundation recently, yeah, so we're on this journey. Tell us about that journey of starting it and what your mission is.
Yeah, the foundation is all about telling the bigger Down syndrome story so that people outside the community can hear it, but also so that the narrative can shift, right? If you can't see yourself in a story, then it is really, really scary. Even on our adoption journey, we started that process in 2006. And in 2006, I didn't know a single person who had adopted. And so I didn't know how I could be a part of that story.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we met a family and they invited us into their home for dinner and we watched this story unfold around us of these two parents with two kids they've adopted. And the mom was like a quote normal person, like this normal mom. I'm like, oh, I can see myself in this.
Yeah.
It's less scary. So telling the bigger Down syndrome story, because Down syndrome doesn't discriminate by race or culture. The story's being told in a kind of a small way, right? So it's that piece that you can, if Down syndrome is a part of your story at all, whether it's through being a teacher or family, any kind of family member, that you have an opportunity to see yourself in it. So we wanted to tell the bigger, more diverse story of Down syndrome. Well, we do that through storytelling weekends where we gather families who have kids with Down syndrome and anybody else who wants to be a part of it to come take beautiful pictures and then tell a little story about their experience as a mom or a dad or a sibling or a grandparent or a teacher or a friend or a neighbor or a coworker so that we can tell the bigger story and get that out there. And then making sure within Down syndrome that the real big story is being told, because oftentimes what we hear and what gets the front row seat is like a hero's story, right? Like you've probably seen the viral videos of the person with Down syndrome, the overcomer, the achiever. And those stories are really important because of the narrative of you can't and you never will. We have to like do away with that. But also, there's a lot of people with Down syndrome and without who aren't the overachiever, right? Who aren't the overcomer. Like there's a lot of people with disability who live with their disability and are restricted by it. And that doesn't make them less human than the person who can overcome. So making sure that when we tell the Down syndrome story, we're not just pointing to the person with Down syndrome who's the prom king and who can run a triathlon and who starts a business and who goes to college and who can drive a car. But I also have a little girl, well, she's 17, who likely will not go to college, who likely will never drive, who probably is going to always need support when it comes to work. And she's really, really valuable.
Yes.
And not less than her counterparts.
Mhm.
So that's the heart behind the stories that we want to tell and share.
And, on that, I know you just came out with a book.
I did.
And so we would love to have you share about it because it speaks to that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So this is my third children's book. My first is called Different, A Great Thing to Be. My second is called Everyone Belongs. So there's kind of a theme here to what I write about. And then my most recent book is called I Like You So Much, Celebrating What Makes You, You. And it just goes along with my heartbeat there that I hope you guys can hear and your listeners can hear of the thing that is so valuable and worthy in every person is it's there. It's intrinsic. Like we're born with it. There's not a thing that we can do to take it away or to add to it. Every one of my kids, every one of us has this value and worth and is an image bearer of a good God with intention and planning and purpose. And so we live in this world that's just constantly telling us to be more, do more, made for more, like achieve, overcome. Again, those aren't all bad things, but they really strip us away from what really matters most. And I think disability and loving a disabled person points to that it's like, oh, you're good because you exist.
Yeah.
Like breath in your lungs and a heartbeat in your chest and love to give and receive. That's enough to be worthy of a life. So I Like You So Much is not a disability specific book, but it's a book that I'm hoping all kids can see themselves in.
Yeah.
So it's things like celebrating your body because your body is going to do exactly what your body is supposed to do. Instead of saying like we celebrate your body because you are a fast runner or because you can swim or because you're going to get first place or whatever it is. Those things are fun and good too. But I wanted to write a book that lets every kid see themselves in the story and let kids know that they are worth celebrating. The thing that's the most worth celebrating about them is that you are you.
We can't tell you how much we love that. That is so beautiful. I mean, our daughter, she has developmental disability as well as autism. And so we always hear these stories from others, or not so much the stories, but the question of, well, what's her superpower, or what is her strength, or what is her special thing? And, what's the response when you don't have something that you can highlight that's an achievement in the world's eyes? And it's all about pointing people back to the intrinsic value of being a human.
Mhm.
Absolutely love that.
That is so interesting because I'm predominantly in the Down syndrome space, and I could see how within autism, people assuming that an autistic person has this superpower, and what an interesting pressure
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have placed on you as a person, and then as a parent,
Abs-
like, oh, their superpower is that they're them.
That's it.
No one else in the world who's like her. She's the only one in the whole world who's her. That's pretty rad.
That's it. I love it. That's so
Well,
good.
so often we value intelligence. There's also this thing called EQ, right? And emotional quotient and connecting with people. And I think individuals with disabilities thrive on that emotional, the emotional intelligence and connecting with human beings and not being superficial. And, she becomes my idol in so many ways on how she can engage this world and people in such a pure way.
Oh,
So,
yeah. I mean,
yes.
we have this story we love to tell. She told me one day, Mom, I'm going to go to Costco and make 4 friends. Like, why 4? I don't know. But she heads out the door with Eric. And sure enough, by the end of a month's time, every worker in our local Costco knew her and knew she was coming, because our daughter will do audibles and
She's
things
very loud.
full of life, and they know it and they're getting it. And it's, talk about shout your worth.
Right. Quite literally, I love it.
That's fantastic. So tell us about this, all the stuff you're doing, your foundation and so forth. Like, how do you balance it all? Raising a family, having 3 kids with needs. Obviously, we've already mentioned in this, which I love, the partnership of marriage. But how do you do all this and take care of yourself in the process too?
I'm a big believer and liver of we can only do what we can do, like doing the best you can with what you got. I think that I have found raising kids with disability has pointed out a lot of limits. I actually don't like this idea of limitless because we're all limited. That's just being a human. Like there's a human experience of being limited like that, and that it's not bad. And I want to be okay with that. Otherwise, it's too much pressure. Like then I'm overwhelmed. So there's a real gift that my kids have ushered me into of not just like accepting that we're limited, but being okay with that, embracing it. And so I think part of like how do you balance it all? There's just a starting point of I can't do it all. And so I'm going to have to depend on some other people to help me do a lot of things. So learning to ask for help is really important. Saying no has become a practice that's so hard for me. Asking for help and saying no are really hard practices for me, but necessary. Understanding my limits, like that I can't do a certain thing, and understanding my kids are limited. They can't do certain things either. And that is okay, right? Like we're going to do our best to be our best selves. But my kids' best selves are always going to have a disability. And my kids' best selves are always going to have Down syndrome. And we're not trying to do away with that. So having that kind of mentality and mindset. More practically, it is like prioritize knowing what the battles we're going to fight. We say all the time, like, you got to pick and choose your battles. This is just everyone says that. I didn't make that up, but it is so true, right? Like we're going to invest this week in this IEP, and that means we're not going to be able to put energy towards this other thing. Or like practically speaking, like this behavior happened at school. That's nice. Like I can't hold that with you, teacher. Sorry. Like you're going to have to figure that one. That it happened. Tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah.
Right. So just trying to have that foundation of I can only do what I can do, and giving myself grace within that. Asking for help.
Yeah, not feeling guilty the things that you can't do, because the life can be so overwhelming at times, and saying, hey, what is, balance is saying no. Balance.
Yeah.
I can only do so much. Balance is they can do their job. I don't need to do their job for them too.
Oh,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Knowing what's ours to do and what's not is a big one too. And I think learning to be content with who my kids are. That when my kids were really little, there's so much pressure. As soon as they get that Down syndrome diagnosis, it's like early start school, or, like the teachers are coming to your house, they're getting OT, PT, speech. It's all happening from the time they are born, basically. And in the beginning, it was so much energy and effort towards these activities. And they're all really beneficial, good activities that we still pursue. But having this mind shift of why am I pursuing it for my child, and what is working for them and what they want. And if it's to make them like be something else, which I think a lot of times that is our, like why we pursue certain things as parents, is so that our kid will be more, better, different. So they're their best self. And that really changed how we pursue things, why we pursue things, how much we pursue, if that makes sense.
Oh, it totally does.
Well, and especially in an education system that it seems like goals are all set up on how can you get to what's normal. Our daughter right now is aged out of the system, and like, are the school goals the most important, or is fullness of life and communication with others and some of these other things that become finding her niche in the world, finding a future job, potentially those types of things. But yeah, sometimes especially getting stuck in the educational system, we find like, oh, we need to do goals that match what their peers are. And, that's a fallacy. That it doesn't need to, get stuck in there. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, totally. We I think, in like staying with this question too a little bit,
Yeah.
like deciding and being intentional about deciding what it is that matters,
Yeah.
and I want my kids at the end of the day to know that they are adored, to know that they are safe, to know that they are loved. And I can do that. And it doesn't take a lot of effort for me to do that. It's pretty natural because that's just the ethos in our home.
Mhm.
And so that I can do. And then the rest of it we're gonna figure out. But as long as I keep that center, that my kids know they are loved and cherished as they are and valued and important, I can do that in my home. That's
Yeah.
achievable.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Figuring that out, we had to be intentional about that because we have to go back to it. Because also at 2 a.m, I will be spiraling because my kid's not reading, and I'm freaking. And then I go down that spiral, and we need to try this thing and this, and we will do those things too. But I have to have that thing to come back to, right? That idea that tethers me, so that I don't spiral out of control. Because we are going to need to work on reading, and we're going to need to find a new reading program, and it's going to require a lot of research.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I can come back to that thing that tethers me, which is, teaching my kids and letting them know that they are good and valuable and wonderful.
Absolutely love that. So, Heather, it is Down Syndrome Awareness Month, and we just want to, again, shout out all the beautiful advocacy that is now going on at this point in life, right? It has just been beautiful to watch the advocacy that is happening in the Down syndrome community. Things like supporting those that are getting a new diagnosis, et cetera. And so looking back, we just thought we'd ask you, what's one thing, and it might be hard to pick just one thing, but that you would want to tell yourself in those early years? And what's one thing you can look back and say, I'm glad I did that?
I feel like I start to become a little bit of a broken record in all this, but the thing I would go back and tell myself with Macy to start, because she was my first one, is, oh, you don't need to change her. You don't need to change her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're going to live a life of working towards being our best selves, and you're going to help her foster that and come alongside her in that. But the goal is not for her to not have Down syndrome or to be more like people without Down syndrome. That's not what we're doing here. It took me a while to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it put some undue pressure on her, that as her little self with that EQ, right? That she can read the room from day one. So I regret that.
There's nothing broken. There's nothing wrong. They're absolutely valued as who they are.
I say this hesitantly, but I would look for a third way with education, meaning, I don't know how you felt when your kids got their diagnosis, but with Down syndrome, there is a huge emphasis on full inclusion.
Yeah.
And I think that the ways that we pushed my daughter into an inclusive classroom, which was her right, like I understand all of it and it is how it should be.
Yeah.
But the reality and how it rolls out, I wonder if we caused a lot of undue trauma in her life.
One size fit all is not really necessarily in the idea of being creative and balanced with things.
Do you guys feel the pressure of an inclusive education when your kids were younger?
So for us, Abby's 21, and in the autism community at the time, the advocacy was not where it's at right now. And so it was very much like fix it, make it better, even heal it,
Yep.
even get over it. And it took a while to let that go and to say, no, she's beautifully and wonderfully created as she is. Let's celebrate that. Let's be where she's at. Yes, let's challenge some things and increase some things and encourage her in some things that she's capable of. The education component came along, and we just did what fell in line, which was public school, ended up moving to charter, and then we ended up moving to non-public. And now it's her own program. It was a journey. The push for inclusion just was not where it is now. Even in the last 10 years when we started out, we had to really push for any inclusion for her. And that was like art class and PE,
Well,
So yeah, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also really good to have that balance.
sometimes the idea of inclusion is just put her in a chair where she's not even engaged with the rest of the people. And we come in there and observe. I'm like, that's not inclusion. There's ways to do it depending. Every kid has different capabilities. And, for our daughter, there was a lot of anxiety if you push her in that situation. But other areas, it would be much more natural to be inclusive.
I feel like where it feels like I put my kid through all this trauma in those elementary years is because the onus for it to work was on her. And we were fighting for an environment that she deserved. That was her right. Legally, it should be this way. But if the people in the room were questioning if she should be there at all, and we're continued to put her in those rooms, fighting for her to be in those rooms, but the people in charge are questioning if she should be there, I just regret doing that. But it's a bit of a conundrum too, because it was her right. And she wanted to be a part of her community. So that's when I say that third way, I also don't think it's a separate special education class necessarily, but we're kind of stuck because we're limited to what's there.
Right.
But I wish I held her heart a little bit more back in the day, like in those earlier school years. And I don't hear parents who have kids with Down syndrome talking about that until their kids are older. And even then there's almost this whisper, like, I put my kid in a life skills class. There's a lot of pressure for inclusion in Down syndrome. So
yeah,
I can understand that.
We hear that, I think, a lot as you get into adult programming too. It's get a job, get trained to get a job. What if that's not the thing? What if it's just not the thing?
Too overwhelming.
What if thriving in life looks different? And that's okay. But wow, that is such a good topic for discussion.
Yeah, we could go on and on. Your second part of the question was, what would I do the same? Or like, what did I like? What I'm glad I did.
Like that you did. What do you look back and you're like, I did that well. Like that worked out well for not just me, but my family. And I would recommend that,
Saying yes to bringing Macy home. I would do that over and over and over again. And I'm so glad that happened. In my infertility journey, there was this moment of God, like it's so simple in my faith practice, but it's like, God is God. God's bigness is so big and so good. Just let it be. And that followed me into when I said yes to Mason. And it's kind of been this, I would go back and do it over and over because it's still part of what we do today. This like open hand posture. Life is going to happen around us. And if we're holding on tight to what we hope it will be and our expectations, we're just setting ourselves up for disappointment in a way, or it's just not the healthiest, best way to be. In my infertility, I started to clench my fists a little bit. This like open hand posture of this is how we're doing life. It's not that we're not planning for the future and hoping for things. It's that we're recognizing that all we have is this moment in this day, and we're going to choose to embrace it. We're going to choose to know that even when it's hard, there's a good God that's bigger than that, and kind of find rest in that. That's been a theme.
Sometimes our false expectations living this life gets in the way and robs us of joy. So you sharing that is kind of just what came to mind, thinking of that, and just allowing life to happen and embracing what does happen as opposed to what you're might be missing out on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that happens is our kids get older. And as they get older, they start getting to the point where you're thinking about future planning. Our daughter is 21 years old. So, obviously we're at that place, aging out of the school system and then thinking about the rest of life. What advice would you have, for the families talking about that journey when you hit out of the education system, future planning, future housing, things like that?
My Macy is 17, so we've got a year until she's an adult, and then a couple more years left with her in school if she wants.
What are some of the things you guys are finding the community is looking at as our children are aging?
I mean, things that we're doing and pursuing that I would recommend to everybody. And I'm in California, so resources are different state to state. There's a program through our regional center called Self-Determination. If this is the first time you've ever heard of it, reach out to your regional center person and say, hey, I'd like to know more about self-determination, and then start the process. I highly recommend that. We have a special needs plan that is not just a trust. So I'm going to give like a plug here because this has been something that is like a practical thing that helps me sleep well at night. That if we hadn't done now, it would be like top of the list. And we worked with a company called Enable, SP, Enable Special Needs Planning. And it's this holistic plan for the future, including a special needs trust and will and all of that, which is different if you don't have a kid or if you have a kid without a disability. They take the whole package, starting like, let's make a plan so that today we're living a full life, your loved one with a disability and everyone who's affected by that person. And there's like this financial plan. It's so adulty. It's like the most adult thing I've ever done that I could not have done without them. But Enable S&P, and we can link it or whatever.
Oh.
That is something that when I think about my future, it gives me rest at night.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Macy, it's tricky because it's important to look ahead with our kids with disability, right? Like it's so important to have plans and know what's coming and have a plan for what's coming. And still, I've lived this whole life of like, and we have this day. So there's a balance there for me. I'm not trying to avoid the future at all. But as she's turning 17, I'm aware of the fact that it's time to look ahead a little further. I don't know how you felt when your daughter was 17, but I'm going to blink and she'll be 21 and then it's a different story, but I'm not there today. So I'm not trying to be naive. Does that make sense? Like I'm not being naive in it. I just don't have a lot of good advice for the listener because every day is already pretty full of decisions. Does that make sense?
Oh,
No, I
completely makes
think
sense.
I think you totally gave the advice, and that is live in the moment. Don't be naive to the future. Plan, but tomorrow will have its own worries. Today you have your worries. You do what you can, and so often we try to plan all the details out in the future, and we have no control over that. We have control over very small things, and those things you can control, you do. You try to put those things into place. A special needs trust, the thing that you gave is a fantastic wisdom for somebody to pursue, but all the details of it. I mean, life is dynamic and you can't control all that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. And I would say having people who are like asking questions of and being connected to people who are ahead of you, right? Like I now have your number. There are so many people who have already done this work. Find the people and ask the questions and lean on those who have gone ahead of you or just barely are ahead of you. Our community is one of our superpowers, right? In the disability space, like the community that we have around us is a superpower if we lean into it.
that's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Heather, we always love to ask this last question, which is what is one thing you'd like to share with our listeners to help bring hope for the road ahead?
This is for all the listeners and not just for your kids, but this is for you and for your kids. And I'm going to lean into my newest children's book, I Like You So Much. And I said it here already, but what I want you to find hope in today is that this is the line of my book, the thing the whole wide, wild world needs the most is you to be you to be you. And I hope that I find hope in that. And I hope the listeners find hope in that you don't have to strive to be somebody else, right? Like it seems so cliche and simple, but we just live in this world where I just find myself doing that. I find my kids doing that. I find my friends doing that. Else is not going to serve a purpose in this world. We need you. That's what we need the most.
Yes.
Love that.
So good. Heather, this has been amazing. We just loved having you on, and thank you so much for taking the time. And we're excited again, Down Syndrome Awareness Month. get the book. Get the book, guys.
All three of them.
Yeah, all of it. And check out the podcast. We are so happy you came on, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was my honor. Thank you so much.
Check out the show notes to find resources and contact information for today's episode.
Yeah, and if you like the podcast, please share it with others and be sure to follow us so you won't miss an episode.
We love to hear from our listeners, so leave us a comment or rating and connect with us on social media or on our website at hopeonthehardroad.org.